Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Open Door podcast. I'm so glad you're here today because we are going to talk about something that kind of touches all of us, whether we realize it or not, and that is community resilience. Now, resilience is one of those words we throw around a lot, right? But what does it actually mean? Think about it like this. When life throws a giant curveball at you, whether it's a natural disaster, tough financial situation, or even something as massive as a global pandemic, how do we bounce back? How do we not just survive, but how do we come back stronger? That's resilience. So for a community, resilience is about coming together, having systems in place, and supporting one another during difficult times. It's not about going about it alone. It's about leaning on each other and kind of figuring out how to move forward as a group. So what is resilience really? Merriam-Webster defines resilience as, quote, the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change, unquote. So it's a fancy way of saying that when bad stuff happens, you figure it out, you adapt, and you grow. But for communities, resilience is so much more than just bouncing back. It's about creating systems and support networks that make sure that no one gets left behind. So I'm going to give you an example. If you've ever visited Greensburg, Kansas, you might be familiar with this story. So back in 2007, a tornado came through and absolutely flattened Greensburg, Kansas. Flattened it completely. It was devastating. But instead of just rebuilding it, Greensburg decided to reinvent itself as a model of sustainability and resilience. So they went in and they rebuilt using renewable energy, using eco-friendly building practices, and they had a vision for the future. So today, it's a very small but powerful example of what resiliency can look like when a community comes together with a shared goal. And so why does resiliency matter? So let's bring this back here. Let's bring it back home to Savannah. Here in Savannah, resilience isn't just a buzzword, it's a necessity. We live in a coastal city, which means hurricanes and flooding are a constant risk. According to SEMA, which is the Chatham Emergency Management Agency, 1 in 4 homes in Chatham County is at risk of flooding during severe storms. Let's take a second and think about that. That's thousands of families who could lose everything in a single storm. And it's not just natural disasters. So when Hurricane Helene hit, we saw how quickly lives could be turned completely upside down. People lost their homes, people lost their jobs, they lost their sense of stability. But we also saw something really incredible. Organizations like the United Way, organizations like the Red Cross, they sprang into action, they provided food, shelter, financial assistance, and they helped people recover. So what does it look like to build a resilient Savannah? Let's talk about some of the organizations that are kind of leading the charge in that. Like I mentioned, the United Way. These folks are incredible. They've set up a rapid response disaster fund to help people get back on their feet after a crisis, whether it's providing temporary housing, food, financial aid. United Way kind of makes sure that resources get to the people that are in need of them at the time. And they don't do it by themselves. They partner with local nonprofits, local businesses, and government agencies to kind of maximize their impact. There's also the Red Cross, specifically their CAP program. So CAP stands for Community Action Program. The CAP team works behind the scenes to make sure that shelters like Emmaus House and community centers are ready for anything. So they can train the staff, they help maintain the buildings, they help make sure that there's enough supplies like blankets, food, first aid kits. They check to see if the building has a generator. And generators are not cheap, so the fact that Red Cross can step in and help an organization like Emmaus House to maintain a generator is major. First aid kits, it's not like all the flashy stuff, but it's the kind of preparation that literally will save a life when disaster strikes. And like I mentioned earlier, is SEMA, again, the Chatham Emergency Management Agency. If you've ever evacuated ahead of a hurricane, you've seen them in action. So they're the ones coordinating evacuation routes, emergency alerts, recovery efforts, that bing that you get on your phone whenever there is a natural disaster that requires that you are alerted to some sort of research. That's SEMA. They also run programs like CERT, which is the Community Emergency Response Teams, and they train regular people like you and me to help out during disasters. And very, obviously this is incredibly important in specifically to Emmaus House and the population that we serve specifically. I can't not mention CSAH, which is the Chatham Savannah Authority for the Homeless. So when disaster hits, people experiencing homelessness are obviously among the most vulnerable. So CSAH works to make sure that they're not forgotten by connecting them to safe shelter, food, resources, getting them on to the bus to get to the civic center, to get to the evacuation route, whatever needs to happen. But they remind us that resilience isn't just about rebuilding buildings, it's about protecting people, right? So here's the thing. Resilience is not just about big organizations or big government agencies. It's about all of us. Imagine what a truly resilient Savannah could look like. What if every neighborhood had a solid emergency plan? What if all of the shelters were always stocked and prepped and ready, and they all had generators and all had first aid kits? What if every person in our community knew exactly where they needed to go and what to do when any variant of disaster strikes, right? That vision is possible, but it takes all of us working together. So what can you do? Obviously, you start small. You make sure your family has an emergency plan. You pack an emergency kit with essentials like water, non-perishable food, first aid. And then the next step outside of the immediate family, you volunteer with groups like United Way or CSAH, or even take a CERT training class through SEMA. Resilience it's really about connection. You look out for your neighbors, especially those people who might be more vulnerable. Check on your elderly friends. Offer support to someone who might be struggling. It's those small acts of care that build a stronger and more connected community. So resilience isn't necessarily just about bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward. It's about learning from the challenges and coming out stronger on the other side. So organizations like the United Way, like Red Cross, like SEMA, like CSAH, they're doing amazing work to make Savannah more resilient. But they can't do it all alone. We all have a role to play. So let's step up. Let's prepare. Let's connect. Let's support each other so that when life does throw us those inevitable curveballs, we're ready to handle them together. Wasn't quite 10 minutes, so I didn't want to keep you too long, but thank you for spending this almost 9 minutes with me today. I hope this conversation honestly inspired you to kind of take a step back and think about, what is resilience in a fresh way, in a new way, and how you can be part of that solution, whether that's your own resiliency in a personal way, as far as individually being able to bounce back from situations, how you can be part of the solution in resiliency with your family and being prepared for disasters or anything that might happen outside of your control. And then in a broader, more, macro way, how can you step up and be part of the solution to, being more resilient in the community and connecting. Until next time, let's keep our doors and our hearts